And we have a typical library portal 7.1 GA1 because we didn't have time to adapt it to GA2. So I'm sorry for the more few minutes of starting time you're going to have. In this particular, is like a simple library portal 7.1, but in OSG modules has all the dependencies we need to so the workshop can function correctly. So once you have the zip unzipped, I'm going to. Is that big enough for the people in the back? Thank you. So you can now go to the folder where the zip has been the portal has been unzipped, and you should be the OSGI and the Tomcat folders. And we are going to, first of all, we are going to execute the portal. So I have to check, just to check that everything is prepared and ready. So you just need to go to Tomcat 9, Bean, Catalina, and call run. You can either call run or start. We prefer run because the logs are going to start in the same window, like this one. So now it's just waiting for our portal to launch, and once it launches, we are not going to touch the UI never again because this is a API workshop, and UIs are like something ugly for us. So yeah, and the second thing you have to do is cloning this repository. It contains the material for the workshop we're going to start. It has two principal folders: library recipes and restaurant app. The restaurant app is just yep. Oh, can you? Yeah, come. It's yeah. That's the URL: github.com library labs APIO workshop. If you go to library labs, I think it's the first repository that's going to appear because we made some adjustments a few minutes ago, so it's on top. In this repo, we have the restaurant tab and the library recipes. The library recipes is a common Gradle project for library with some already created modules for a project. And the restaurant tab is an Angular app that we can use to try our APIs at the end of the workshop if we have time. If not, you can always try at home if you want. So you just need to clone the repo. You can go to clone or download and copy the clone with SSH. I'm going to open a new tab. So remember to if you run the Catalina with run, remember not to close this tab never, because the Catalina is going to stop, and that happens to us a few minutes ago, and it's a real pain. So don't do that ever. We are going to go here and just git clone the repository. Víctor, tenemos. Clic. Está capado. Okay, someone just told me that you need to clone it with HTTPS because the Wi-Fi blocks SSH. So it's just the same, but with the whole URL to the repo. Okay. We have a ghost. Yeah, that's it. And once we have the repo clone, should be straightforward. You can just open your ID of preference. We prefer IntelliJ IDEA because it's the one we use daily and is the one with which we prepare the workshop. But some like 5 minutes ago, one of our colleagues tried with even with Visual Studio, and works smoothly. So you can use clips, you can use library ID, you can use whatever you want. We are going to use just IntelliJ IDEA. So just in case you have installed it, we can make a quick review over the features. Okay, once the yep, our portal just launched. So once you are prompted with this screen, we can just now open. Wait a sec, and I'm going to remove some of this from here. Okay. Once we have this, we can just go to click to in open, go to our location, like I said, desktop, APIO workshop, and open library recipes. Don't open the APIO workshop directly, because then he's not going to understand it's a Gradle project, and some of the you'll have to do some manual work. It's better to just open library recipes. That since it has a build Gradle file, it's going to automatically detect that it's a Gradle project. So library recipes, open, and we should be prompted with this screen that I don't know if you can see it in the back, but it says that that it's importing a project from Gradle, and we can select to use auto import. So any module on any new module on any new dependency we add, he's just going to run build to the Gradle and download it and prepare everything for us, and just leave the other options as default and click OK. Now this is the boring this is the boring type of for the workshop, because we now have to wait till Gradle downloads like half Maven. So it's going to take like 10 minutes. Do this and wait. Well, for me, it runs really quickly, because I already have in my computer the dependencies in my local Maven. But if you have never opened an APIO project, it's sure that it's going to take a while to open it. Okay. So once we have that, we can start the workshop. How many of you have already start Liferay Portal? Okay. How many of you have cloned the repo? And how many of you have imported a project to our IntelliJ IDEA or other IDE? If any one of you have a problem with these first steps, just raise your hands, and my colleague Victor can help you while I give the first talk, and then while he gives the second part, I can help you with the other part. Okay. Yeah. In GA2, it has been they have made a complete cut of the time. It's like right now, I think like more or less like 30 seconds. In previous versions, it takes a really long time, but we didn't have the time to prepare the workshop for GA2. There were some dependency problems that we needed to adjust, and we just simply had the time. Sorry. Pablo, ¿vosotros teníais? Okay, so if you are here, I suppose that you want to know something about creating APIs in Liferay, creating headless, creating APIs with APIO. Just wants to know what APIO is. Maybe how many? First of all, how many of you attend the conference? And how many of those attend to the APIO talk or any of the APIs talk? There were a few. Okay. First of all, the actual title of our workshop is Recipes with APIO. And I'm going to explain why. why it's called that. And it's a really a funny thing that only Spaniards understand at first, but we want to include you all in our joke. Uh, I'm going to give you the link for the slides in a minute, and in that APIO you can click it to go to a website that explains what APIO means in Spanish. It's in Spanish, APIO means celery, the vegetable. So for us, it was like this is the perfect name for a product that builds APIs in Spanish. So that's the joke. So we can say that it's recipes with celery, and now we all are part of the joke. First of all, ask any doubt you have, even with, it doesn't matter if it's about the repo, about the IntelliJ idea, about any of the steps that we are going to follow. Liferay Portal doesn't go up, Liferay Portal goes down. Whatever need you have, just ask for it. And as I promised, the slides are available here. If you want to copy that URL, slider.io, AHDAZMA, recipes with APIO. Well, I'm going to say APIO because APIO sounds really weird to me to say, so I'm going to say APIO. That is a word in Spanish. Sorry for that. Okay, well, the APIO workshop that you all already have. First of all, what's the state of the APIs in Liferay Portal in 2018? We, since long time ago, we have lots of different APIs to consume Liferay Portal services from the outside as a headless. We have the SOAP APIs. We have the JSON WS APIs that are generated automatically from Service Builder. And since 7.1 version, we have support for JAX-RS with the JAX-RS REST extender. And in 7.1, we have the whiteboard that Carlos Sierra shows us yesterday in his talk, and we are going to use that. Okay, then preparing the environment, you should already have this. There's the last thing. You need to download a REST client if you want. If you are a GUI lover like I am, if you are a hardcore coder, you can use Curl or whatever tool you want in your terminal. So, what are we going to do in this afternoon after lunch, so we don't get sleep and so we're going to build a Liferay Portal headless API, our first Liferay Portal headless APIs with JAX-RS and APIO. And what's it going to be about? It's going to be about this. And it's not going to be about The Simpsons. Sorry if you made that assumption. We're going to build an API about restaurants and recipes. So imagine we are building a portal or something like that for a set of restaurants owned by some company that contains that have some recipes for their kitchen assistants to prepare, and we are going to build all that into as a headless app. So we are going to build an API that publishes Liferay Portal organization as restaurants. All the organizations in this portal are going to be restaurants, so we can treat them as if it are restaurants. We are also going to publish their recipes. We are going to follow standards. That is something that our APIs, we couldn't say that our previous APIs follow lots of standards apart from JSON. So we are going to strictly follow standards. We are going to allow collection pagination in our endpoints. That's like a tweak. And it's going to work. That's the most important part of all the parts. So how we are going to do this? With JAX-RS, of course. This is the standard of standards for API development in Java. But didn't we say that this was an APIO workshop? Okay, it is true. We are going to create APIs with APIO, But since with APIO, you're going to see that creating APIs is really fast. And to understand the benefits that APIO gives us, we are going to start building the APIs from scratch with JAX-RS. And once we have those APIs, we are going to migrate them to the APIO annotations to see how different are one from the other and what benefits and drawbacks have each other one. So what do we have in this repository, in these modules that you have just imported in IntelliJ IDEA? We have a demo that creates several mock data for our app. First of all, we have restaurants. Then we have chefs, just users with a certain role and key and linked with a certain organization as a chef. We have kitchen assistants, who are the one that are going to consume the APIs to get recipes of the restaurants they work for and can prepare them for the customers. And then we have the recipes. And this is why we didn't want this workshop before the lunch, because while we were preparing this talk and we have this image in front of us, every time we have this image, we get hungry. So it's better at this hour. So in the library recipes demo, we have all the things we need to create this all the boilerplate and all the services that we need to expose the APIs. And this is going to create by default 25 assistants, 25 recipes for each restaurant, 20 restaurants, and is going to assign 4 assistants per restaurant. So this is just a default OSGI config file. If you want to tweak because it takes too long or because you just want one of each, you can just create a file with that name and deploy and tweak the properties and deploy it to the configs folder inside OSGI in the Liferay Portal repository folder. So let's start. Before this, we are going to do just that. We have all the different modules we need here. We have the demo data creator for category, for recipe. We have a recipe API. We have the Go shell that give us some power. Okay, we have different things. So first of all, where's the terminal? Yep. Can you see the terminal back there? Okay. First of all, so our workshop understand where Liferay Portal is. We need to create a environment variable that points to our library folder. So we are going to create the library home variable that points to, in my case, desktop, and I think is Liferay Portal. Yeah. So once you have that, you can just call deploy, and all the contents in the workshop are going to be deployed to our Liferay Portal instance. So first of all, we need to use the Gradle wrapper you have in the repository, so you don't need to download Gradle or Maven or anything else to your PC. You just need to call deploy, and we should see that is deploy. Yeah, it is deploying to desktop Liferay Portal OSGI modules. So if we go to our first tab, we should be seeing all the instances creating, and the demo is going to tell you what is creating and when. Right now, it should be creating restaurants. So restaurants created should appear in any time soon. What just happened? Oh, yeah, just Gradle deploy. He's creating something because Elastic is being updated, but he hasn't tell us yet what. Come on. Okay, we are going to trust that it's creating the content. If some of you see some message like restaurants created, kitchen, yeah, okay, that's perfect. Once it finishes, the recipes are going to take really long because there are 20 restaurants and 20 recipes per restaurant, and they are creating by consulting an API, a public API that returns a random recipe. So it's going to take a while, but while we keep going with the workshop. Once you finish, yep. Yep. Once you finish, you will have you will find a two what? Okay, that's that. If you find this the content of element type category, just ignore it. At the end, when it finishes creating the recipes, it's going to tell you two commands that you can use in the Go shell. Uh, how many of you knows what the Go shell is? Okay, for those who don't, the Go shell is like the standard terminal to access the OSGI state of the library portal. And to use it, you just need to have telnet, and you need to open a telnet to localhost 11.3.11. Sorry, I put that, and that's going to open a new terminal where we can insert commands like lb, that is going to list all the bundles that we have in our OSGI. And at the end of it, you should see all the bundles that are in our workshop, like the library category, library recipes, like library recipes demo. All of it should be here. And you can the best thing about the Go shell is that you can create commands to be executed here that do whatever you want. And for example, in APIO, we created two commands that we can see if we call help, or we should be seeing them. Come on. Yeah, we have APIO assistance. I come to wait a sec. Yeah, we have APIO assistance and APIO restaurants. You can just type this command. The first one is going to give us all the restaurants created, so all the organizations with their ID, their name, and the email of the chef. These are real users that are being introduced into the library portal instance, whose password is all APIO, lowercase. So you can use one of these email and that password to call the API. So we can see that it contains only the content that he can see. Like I can see because if we use the Omni admin user, we are going to see everything, and that hasn't any fun. So we're going to use one of these. You can use either one of these, or you can use the other assistants to see since this is pretty big, to see all the kitchen assistants and the organization that they are a member to. So every restaurant has only one chef, but it has multiple assistants. So you can have an assistant that is in 2 or 3 restaurants, and a restaurant can have 2 or 3 assistants. Okay. So once we're here, it's now time for Victor. Victor. And I'm just going to go into the shadow. Is something, Nick? Any help? Oh, sorry.
Okay, we are going to cover a bit about JAX-RS because we are going to use next. How can I say that? Who of you are familiar with JAX-RS? And who have used JAX-RS at least once? Okay. we are going to do the very simple example with just REST, so it's going to be easy, and you are going to see.
I should see this. Okay. See ya. Ready.
Okay,
Oh, yes.
as Alejandro tell you later, just REST is the standard for Java for creating APIs in Java. So we are going to
Wait a
use
second,
this.
I'm going to.
A very basic example of how it looks. It will be something like this. You have a method and you have to annotate it. It's annotated base annotation. Okay, so you have to indicate the HTTP verb first, then the path. For example, you have a lot of options. This is an example. So you are going to specify the verb, which is get, and then you are going to specify the path. Okay, and then you are going to say that this endpoint is going to produce JSON. You can have like a couple of media types too if you want. And if you see in the path, there is like a curly bracket. So this indicates that this is going to extract this param of the URL automatically, and you have to put this on the. You have to annotate the param too to say, okay, this param over here is you are going to pass me what this comes in the URL, okay? And what are the parts we need from JAX-RS to create application or to create APIs? The first one is the application, which is what puts together everything that you have. You have to create an application and then start aggregating resource in order to work and manage the API resource. This is an example application. This is only just REST. We are not going to use this because we are going to use the whiteboard, and the declaration is a bit different, but it's basically the same. Okay, we have to indicate the resource here in this method, and the resource are classes that are annotated with path. Okay, so in this case, the resource is going to. This is the class that is going to manage all the endpoints on /blogs. Okay, and you can see another example with all the annotation. In this case, is another get endpoint. Okay, so this is like we see before. We are going to make an example later. And the other important thing, they are the extension, okay, because we can customize a lot about all the requests. For example, if you want to extract, for example, the credential of the request, you can make a filter, for example, okay, and this is going to take all the request when the request comes, it's going to execute this code, and you can inject values in your method in order. Okay, for this method, I need the user, and I can get the user from the request, and I don't need to do it every time. I can make a filter and then use it in all the places. Okay, so how do we use JAX-RS in Liferay Portal? This is if you went to the Carlos Sierra talk, he spoke about this, and it's the JAX-RS whiteboard. Okay, so it's like mixing JAX-RS and OSG, and you need this in order to work. As you can see, in the other case, it was application path. We don't need that. We need a raw add component, and then some properties, which will be the same as application path. And we are going to make a very basic exercise. Okay, this is like the foundation. We are going to make an API with just REST, and then we are going to change to APIO. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do, you already have, is you open the project, you have a folder here. Okay. Okay. If you open this here, you already have some classes. Okay. In this SRC folder. Okay. You already have the resource defined, but they are not not annotated. So we are going to make the annotation. This is because we wanted you to only worry about the annotation and just the rest and not worry about. It's inside library recipe REST and then in the source folder. Okay.
Oh yeah. Just a thing. From now on, we are going to only work in the library recipes REST directory. So never deploy again from the previous one, because it's going to redeploy all the demo and it's going to take another 5 minutes to create all the data. So it's important to move to the library portal, to the library recipes REST folder inside library recipes.
Yes, and this is the first thing you have to do, because
you can work from it.
You don't have to create more recipes. Okay.
Because we are going. It's a real pain to. Yes. Sorry. Yep.
As if you have checked the repo, there is a Markdown file which contains all the steps that we are going to follow. Okay, I'm going to open it because there are some configuration that you don't need to learn to. So this, for example, I don't have to memorize it, so I will have to copy it. No, sí. Yes, of course. But this file is not on the slides. You have to clone the project in order to watch these examples. Okay, can you see it from behind? Okay.
Yeah, this file is in the workshop repository next to the README. It's called Steps Markdown and has all the code that we are going to introduce during the workshop. Yep.
Okay, so who have the recipes created and everything working? Can you raise your hand? It's better to wait a bit. Okay. You have to open the console. Okay. So you don't know.
You mean the JAX REST annotations, the add path, add get, or the add component of OSGI? Okay.
Not everything.
Yeah. I go.
No. I'm going to.
Just an explanation. Someone just asked me.
No, but this is what we are going to do to create this.
These properties that we have here, apart from these ones that are completely whiteboard properties, this last one, the auth verifier filter, is the property that you can use to hook this application with a specific auth filter of Liferay Portal. This is a Liferay Portal property, and with the great thing about the whiteboard is that with just this line in your application, in your recipes application, your component, it automatically adds support for basic authentication in all the endpoints that hang from this app. And you can, for example, you have multiple verifiers. You can even create your own, but you have one for OAuth 2 that Carlos talked about it yesterday. And just by changing this basic OAuth header with the OAuth 2 property, it just automatically adds support for OAuth 2 to your application. So you don't need to do anything else. You don't need to create any filter. You don't need to create anything apart from this property. It's just that. And with the coming of OSGI 7 and the support for properties with annotations, you don't even you are not even going to have this part. You just have to annotate this with add support auth or add support basic, and it's going to work out of the box. That's good.
Okay, we are going to start writing our APIs. What is the IntelliJ? Okay, so as you can see, we have the application empty. We have to fill it with annotation and with method. And the first thing we are going to do is annotate with component because it's going to be an OSGI component and we have to deploy it to Liferay. So the first thing is to declare it as a component. Okay, and it has some properties that we have to fill. The first thing we have to do is say, okay, this service is an application. Okay, and now we have to define the properties that we saw before. Okay, I will explain one by one. So I'm going to copy this because this is a very large name, and it's very hard to. It's very easy to put something wrong. So this is not here. Here, okay. I'm going to copy all of this and I'm going to explain each one. Okay, what is IntelliJ? Sorry for the screen movement. Okay, the first one, we are telling that this application is going to be on /rest. Okay, so when we try this application, we are going to say, okay, localhost 8080, okay, /o, because all the APIs that are on the whiteboard are from /o, and then /rest. In this case, you can customize this the way you want. Okay, you can have multiple applications in your server. And the next one is the name of the application that we want. This is not mandatory, but it's important because, for example, when we are going to make resource, okay, they are going to be separate classes, and we have to say, okay, this resource I want to associate with this specific application, and we are going to do that using this name. Okay, so this name is important. Okay, and the last thing is the thing that mentioned Alejandro. We are going to say that this API are authenticated using basic. Okay, just for convenience because it's very easy to make the call. We don't have to configure out2 or something like that for this example. Okay. With all of this, the only thing that we need is first declare a singleton here. Okay. This is like what are the resource classes that this application is going to have. For this example, we are going to say this. Okay. So we have to create a set with all the resource, and we are going to create a singleton because it's going to. We don't need to change this set. Okay. So here I say, okay, this application now is a resource. So we can have method like, for example, we're going to make the hello world. So we are going to make a method that return a string and it's called hello. Okay. And it's going to return just hello world. Okay, very simple. And now we have to annotate that to say that JAX-RS, what are the verbs that we support with this method, what we are going to return. Okay, so it's very simple because we don't have to say get because we are going to use a get request to access this. Okay, and we can say that we can put the path, and in this case, it's going to be hello. So we're going to say /res/hello to call this method and call the API. And in this case, we are going to say that this endpoint produce, I don't know, is media type text plain. Okay, so we're going to return text plain in this case. Okay, with just this, we just create an endpoint, a valid endpoint. So if we deploy this, make sure that you are in this folder and not in the parent folder because you are going to wait a lot if you are in the parent folder. And just the same instruction we are going to deploy. We are going to call clean because I'm not sure if we already deployed this. Okay. I don't know if you can see the. Okay. The command is clean deploy. You have to use the Gradle wrapper from the parent folder. So now if we open like a REST application to make requests, we are going to POW. We are going to use POW. This is a normal REST client, okay? So we are to make a project, and we are going to. Oh, it's not. No. Okay, you have to use localhost 8080. I'm going to put this URL bigger after I. No, ¿es así? Más. No. Es verdad. I'm going to use curl for this example because it's easier. So we have to call this, and where our application is on REST, and then we define an endpoint on hello. So we are going to call this. Oh, okay. We have to call this URL here. Okay. What is that? What do you have this, Alejandro? Okay. Ah, okay. Where is the item? Okay. Vale. Okay. Okay. So we have to pass this as we say that we need basic authentication. We have to pass the user, okay, which is the Alejandro. I think this is not working. Keyboard. I don't know why this is not working. Yes, okay. I don't know why the add is not working. I'm going to copy one because I don't know why it's not working. It's not working. No el arroba. El copia. No, it's okay. So if we call this, we receive the hello world string that we put in the endpoint. Okay. So we have our first endpoint created, or first API created with just a REST. Okay. No lo ejecuto. Okay. So after doing this, we are going to start with the real application. Okay. So here in the internal package, you have other classes, which is they are going to be the part of the API. So we have organization, that it will be our restaurants. We have recipes, okay, and we have user, that they are going to be our chef or our kitchen assistant. You already have method that are going to call library service and then return the response. So you don't have to deal with library services. It's everything is already done. So we will be adding some annotation, and we are creating some object because you can return this object here. You have to return like a annotated object in order to say JAX-RS, okay, this I want to return this object in JSON mode, in JSON as a JSON. Okay, so we have to annotate the fields that we want to expose and other things that we are going to create. Okay. So the first thing we are going to do, we are going to create the models, okay, that we are going to use in this case. So we are going to create a new package here. I'm going to call model, and we are going to put all the models here. The first model we are going to create is the organization. I'm going to put the DTO to distinguish between the library one and our object. Okay. So this is going to receive. This has to have a entity constructor. Okay. And we are going to create another constructor with the organization object from library. And we are going to expose some values, not all the values. We are only interested in some fields. Okay. Mm. Oh, sí. Okay. So for example, we are going to retrieve the ID. Okay. So we are going to say get organization ID. If you are using IntelliJ and you put this code and if you add a point field, it's going to create an attribute of the class for you. Okay. If not, you can do it manually. We are going to just expose 4 fields to make this easier. We're going to expose the name too. So we are going to say organization get name. And the same one, we are going to create a field. We are going to expose the logo too. And we have another folder here which has a class util, because for getting the logo or something like that, they are going to do some things. And in order to make it this easy and to focus only on the JAX-RS part, you have some utility methods here to grab some attributes, okay, to calculate some URLs, etc. So we're going to say get logo URL, and we are going to pass the organization, okay, and we are going to expose this again as a property of the class. And the last thing we are going to expose is the chef ID. Okay, so the chef responsible of this restaurant is going to get user ID. Okay, the same. We create a property. We have to create also getters, because this is what the framework for serializing this class is going to use. I'm going to wait a bit until you create something.
How many of you are in this point of the workshop? And how many are in the last part or any of the previous one? Okay. Do you need any help with some of the? Yeah. I can.
What is? Yes. We're going to only use one DTO just to know how to do it, and then we are copying the steps from the other ones. Are you in this point now? Okay. Okay. Anyone needs help? Okay. Wait, what happened? It's not working. Can you show me your code? Okay. I think we are going to continue because there is a lot of stuff left and we don't have much time. So if you didn't reach this point, you can just copy from the steps file to make things quick, or just look at my screen and see how I am doing. So the last thing we have to do is create getter for all the fields. Okay, IntelliJ already generates that for you. Okay, so we have our custom object or custom pollo, and we have all the fields that we want to expose, and the fields that we want in the JSON that is going to return our API. So now we have to annotate this to say, okay, this is a pollo for converting, for serializing our organization. Okay, so the first thing we have to add is the annotation XML root element. It's a very strange name because we are going to use JSON and it says XML. So, but it's the standard for Java. Okay. And now we have to annotate the method that we want to expose. So we have to annotate with XML element. Okay. So we have to annotate all the fields with this annotation to say, okay, I want to expose those. Okay. Okay. Other thing that you can do is if in this repo, apart from the master branch, there is another branch called, I think it's final or something like that. There is another branch, and with all the steps we are going to follow. So you can just check out to that specific commit and follow from that. Okay, so we have our class annotated. Now we are going to create the endpoint that returns this object. Okay, so we're going to go to the organization resource file, which is going to be our resource for restaurants, and we are going to start annotating it. So the first thing, as before, is this class is going to be a component, like everything in OSGI. Okay, and we are going to say, okay, this is we have to define the service. We don't have to define a specific service, so we can say object.class and another properties here that I are going to copy again because they are very hard to and very easy to put it wrong. Okay, so you can do this too. So you can. I have to copy these properties here. Okay, the first one, as I mentioned earlier, you have to do. This is a resource, and I want to link this resource with an application. We need to do that. So we create an application and we specify this name in the application. Okay, you can see it in the recipes application. Here is the same name. Okay, so now we are going to say, okay, we want to select an application. This is the property, and we are going to select the application that has this name. Okay, there is only one application, the previously created application, so we are going to use it, and we are going to say, okay, this is a resource. Okay, because they are resource and extensions. So to distinguish between that, you have to specify that this is a resource. So after doing this, it will be a valid resource, so we can start annotating. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is we're going to define as routes for our APIs. So these APIs are going to be on organization route URL. So we have to put organization. Okay, you don't need the slash. You can put it, but it's not needed. The slash at the first of the word. This is not. This is not needed. Okay. So we are going to start annotating method. The first thing we are going to do is, okay, this is already done. Okay. So we are going to say, okay, we are going to define this method as a get operation. Okay. So the slash is optional. You can put it, but it doesn't matter. If you want, it doesn't matter. So here we are going to say, okay, we don't need path here because, okay, when you call this organization, they are going to look for a method that this doesn't have other paths. So we are going to call this when we call organization. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is, okay, just REST doesn't know how to serialize our organization object. So this is why we create a new object. So the first thing is change the return type to organization DTO. Okay, and this failed because this is returning an organization, but we can convert this to organization DTO. Okay, we are going to make a string to make things simpler. You can do a for loop if you want, and just call the map function, which is going to iterate over all the elements and make an operation to them. So we are going to say, okay, from each organization DTO, we are going to execute this function. In this case, if you are familiar with Java 8, you know that you can have a reference method. So this receive an organization. Okay, and we are going to create an organization DTO from that organization. So we can say new organization DTO. Okay, and we are going to pass the organization. And then after doing the map, we are going to convert it back to a list with the collect method. So we are going to say collect to list. Okay, so this is going to return a collection DTO now. Okay, this IntelliJ is complaining because this thing can be simpler. As I already mentioned, you can use the method reference. Okay, so this is the same as doing this. It's like, okay, apply the method, the constructor to all the elements of the list. Okay. Yes, this is there. Yes. This is already prepared with all the service that the API needs. So you don't have to worry about it. It's only about learning how to make APIs from those services. Okay, so we can just do something like this. And just with that, we are going to have an API that returns a JSON with the information that we need. So if we deploy this again with the same command, with clean deploy, okay, you can see the command here. It's the same as before, clean deploy, okay. And if we wait until this is, you can see that our service has started. So we have all our APIs available, okay. The thing is that we need to know each restaurant is associated with one user. So we have to select one user and say, okay, I want to see the restaurants of this user. We can use the omni-admin. We have to look for a specific user. And as Alejandro mentioned earlier, you have the utility here in the console that you can say in the Go shell, that you can say APIO restaurant. Okay, and it's going to show the list of restaurants and the email of the user associated to that restaurant. So you can select the one that you like more. Okay, and just we are going to make another request. Okay, so this the same as before. Instead of calling REST hello, we are going to call REST organization because this is the path we have defined. Okay, and instead of test, all the users had the same password, which is APIO. So it's very easy to remember. Okay, so we can say APIO, and this is going to show the list of restaurants. This user only have one restaurant, so it's going to show only one. Let's see. It's not show anything. What happened? Okay. If you are using curl, you have to say because some REST client do this by default to ask for JSON specific. So we have to add a header here to say, okay, I want JSON. I don't want other thing. So we have to add the asset header, and we say application / JSON, which is the name for media type JSON. Okay, so this is have to return now. No, it's not returning anything for some reason. Okay. What happened? See. No. Ah, no, okay. I think it's this one. For having, this is the sample that I mentioned earlier. You can say, okay, I need something from the request. In this case, we need the logged user from the request. So this is prepared because it needs an annotation. We built another type, which is a filter, okay, in order to say, okay, when a provider, sorry, I can show you, it's a very simple class. It says, okay, here is the request, make whatever you want with it and return something. So for example, here is the user provider, okay? This is one, yes, okay. So as you can see, antes, before was a resource, in this case is an extension, okay? And we say, okay, we only need this. This is prepared for a later example of APIO. Okay, so say, I need a context provider of users. So we are going to return a user from the message, which is the request. Okay, so in this case, we are going to say, okay, give me the current user of the request. So after we publish that, we can inject this user in all the method that we are creating. Okay, so just create this, deploy, and then in our method here, you can see that we need the user, but we are not passing it in the query pattern or something. It's in the credential. So we have a special annotation here. It says context. Okay. So when you put context and put a class here, JAX-RS is going to look for a context provider that provides a user from the request. Okay. So after this, we will have the user available here. Okay. And we don't have to parse the request more than once. Okay. So I hope that after I deploy this is going to work. Okay. And after we deploy this, it's already started. So let's see now if this works. I hope so. Yes, now works.
No, it's
Okay.
You can just
You can see here. This is the
wait a second. This is
the JSON that this is going to that is returning. Okay. I can. Okay. Okay. So it's returning the logo, the name, the organization ID, and the user ID, which are the properties that we put on the model, the DTO. Okay. So no. Hemos dicho eso, ¿no? So we are very little time to finish. So we are going to move to the comic that already have all this implemented. You have seen an example. Where is that? Of how to create a very basic endpoint and return an object as JSON. Okay. So we are going to skip all this process because we are going to repeat this in all the methods here. We are going to create a POYO for organization, for recipes, and for user. So we are going to skip that, which is all the same. Okay. You are already saw how to do it. So Alejandro is going to continue with the APIO part. Okay. Hmm?
Okay, first of all, we are going to remove everything. You can use the terminal. You can use a Git GUI if you want. For example, I have a Git Kraken here. That is a really nice GUI for Git. I love GUIs. So we can open the project. Is the APIO workshop that is somewhere here. Desktop APIO workshop. So if you navigate from there, maybe it's not really. Yeah, we have the master branch, and in that master branch is a hook with a. Forget about the whip. It's just a. Maybe I can hide it. So that's the commits we are. That's the changes we have done with the JAX-RS code, and in the final branch we have all the steps created one step at a time, one commit at a time. So we're going to move to the last one, JAX-RS plus JSON API. You can just move with a git checkout with the commit. Just move to the discard all the changes you may have done. Move to the branch with git branch and just check out to that commit with git checkout and the hash from that commit. Here is, yep, here is just really much easier. And first of all, before continuing with the workshop, I'm just going to explain what we would have done if we would have like 3 hours more for doing all the endpoints. We would have created like my colleague Victor said, we have created 4 DTOs, one for users, one for recipes, one for organizations or restaurants, and one for addresses. Addresses is the DTO that contains all the information about an organization's address. So as Victor do with the first one, for example, with user, we have just a file annotated with XML roots element with all the. It has to have all the fields we want to expose are private fields, and it needs to have public getters and setters, and the public empty constructor. So the JAX-RS machinery can create an instance of this class and provide all the information. And we just need to annotate with XML element all the elements we want to expose. And one thing that I don't know that if Victor commented it, that we can use the name property, name value in these XML elements to change the name that is going to be shown when this is consumed as XML or JSON. If we don't provide that name, he's going just to, by convention, he's going to use the getter name without the get and in camel case. So this could be converted to ID. This is going to be converted to portal URL, to a screen name, blah, blah, blah. That's on the DTO part. And in the resource, it's just the same as Victor did with the restaurant. We will have a recipe resource exposed in the recipe path, and the retrieve recipe we just added at get to say that this is going to be retrieved with a get request. We add the add path with ID between brackets. This is telling that this is a variable from the path, and when we call recipe slash 25, in that ID is going to contain the 25, and to retrieve it in our method, we just need to annotate one of our parameters with path param and the name of the variable. Yep. In this case, you just know it because you know that the recipe identifier is a long, and JAX-RS is going to check for you if what the user sends is a long or not. If it's not a long, and it tries to convert it, it's going to say a bad request 400 bad request exception, saying that this should be along and it's whatever it is, and that's it. Yep. 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 That's it's there is a property here that I think is guests allowed, something like that. Let me just a sec. Yeah, it's this one. Uh he asked me if there is a way to allow guests to call our API, and it's just by adding this property to our application. It can be either all the for those who are not really used to OSGI. Um, all these properties can be added here when you declare the component, or you can add them in the via a config file that is just deployed to your folder. So you can, with the whiteboard, you can, for example, add an auth verifier for OAuth or for guest in hot deploying. No problem. Okay, so that's it. That's all we have is just the same job over and over. And now we are going to see how APIO helps us building these APIs with much more faster and with much more functionality. So we've passed this exercise, creating the application and also converting the resources we previously have using our recipe services to JAX-RS. And also we return JSON as by returning our annotated DTO with XML, roots element, blah, 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 blah. So we are now starting the fun part of the workshop. So we are going to talk about APIO Architect. APIO Architect was born with a clear idea in our minds. We want to create a toolkit or a library or a framework, whatever you want to call it, that could help us creating APIs that are evolvable. That's our top priority. We don't want to have the same problems that our JSON WS and most of the APIs out there has, that if you couple them too much to your internal models, each time you modify any of those internal models or any of those internal operations, your API is going to break. Your clients are going to be pissed. They're going to have to send new versions to the app stores and something like that, and it's going to provoke pain to lots of people. If we also want to be able to reuse as much code as possible. You've seen that just for a simple API of recipes and restaurants, we have to on the back we have lots of code that all that utilities, all that calls, all the annotations that JAX-RS need. We want to also leverage and to reduce that boilerplate. The other thing is that, yep. The other thing we want is that there is a big problem with documentation in everything, but in APIs, that problem is. I worked as a mobile developer for a while in Liferay, and I had to consume our JSON WS APIs. So I understand you, and I understand the pain of not having a documentation for a certain endpoint and not knowing what do I need to send to this endpoint. So we also wanted that the documentation could be as up to date as possible to the code we've written. And of course, we want that the work with creating annotations with APIO, creating APIs with APIO is fun. So first question is how to design APIs that are capable of evolving, because evolvability is like a really lighter concept. For these evolvable APIs, we have a strong foundation that is the REST foundation. The REST as the original image of REST was created, not the new one. The REST is that URLs are the important part. No. That's the REST as REST was created, and REST has two strong pillars on top of it. Hypermedia. How many of you know what Hypermedia is? And how many of you have used Hypermedia today? All of you have used Hypermedia today because all of you have opened the repo and downloaded, and just by following that link, that's Hypermedia. That's the core of Hypermedia. So what does Hypermedia means in API? It means that our API is discoverable like you discover a web page. You don't want to developer network / blah blah / and go to the part of the developer network you want. You go to the entry point to developer network and navigate through the links until you find the content you want. That's what we want to create with the Hypermedia APIs. And also there's a strong foundation on the shared vocabularies that we're going to see in a minute. But these are not new concepts, as I say. For example, and this is what I promised, this is the original introduction of REST by Roy Fielding in the year 2000. And it says, REST style is an abstraction of the architectural elements within a distributed hypermedia system. It's all a bit jabber, but the important thing is that Hypermedia is here. So that's he says that in order to do REST well, that APIs, that REST APIs need to be Hypermedia APIs. So most of us, I include myself, have been doing REST the wrong way. So was REST well done? Martin Fowler specifies in his blog a while ago, and he sets 4 levels for the APIs. First is the swamp of POCs, when you don't follow HTTP standards, you don't use HTTP verbs, every is get or every is post, and you don't even have resources, you just send data in every format you want. Then the level 2 is using resources. You modulate resources. You have your /users /ID, and that /ID just return that user that has a certain more of schema. Then level 2 is the HTTP verbs. You use get when you want to retrieve something. You use delete when you want to remove something. You use put when you want to replace something. And the last one, the glory to get to the glory of REST, is following the Hypermedia Controls. So what are these Hypermedia Controls? We're going to see it in a minute. How are we solving this? How are we solving getting if our objective is getting to the glory of REST? How are we solving this? First of all, with the APIs created with APIO have only one home URL. So ideally and hypothetically, the consumer can only understand one URL of your whole API and knows how to navigate to the next resources. So how do we do this? For example, this is a real example of APIs created with APIO today. This is the root endpoint. It says JSON LD and I don't have something to point, and contains all the necessary information so a clever consumer understands how to navigate to the different resources. For example, here we're saying that the type of this resource is an entry point, so our consumer knows this is the entry point of our API, and has inside a collection element has different elements that provides access to new APIs. For example, the first one of all contains an @ID that points to the URL of a new collection, and it says under the ID and type collection that endpoint is going to return a collection, and under type is manages, and it's saying that collection is that endpoint is going to return a collection that manages blog postings. So we can create, in fact, we have, for example, one for Android and for Java that knows how to navigate through this system. So you can just say, go to the entry point and navigate to the endpoint that gives me blog postings or that gives me users. And he just knows where to go. That's the first part, the entry point. Then there's the affordance types. It's a contract with consumer that defines affordances. I don't know how to say this word in another way. They're just relation types, relation names, things that are standard and that the consumer can understand to know how to navigate and where to go and what to retrieve in order to use your API. And a simple start is with the IANA, a relation type that grows each year, grows a bit more. And these IANA links contains, for example, all the names that your resources should have, for example, for pagination. This is, how many of you know what HAL is? Not the computer, the representation. HAL is one of the first hypermedia formats. It's really well adopted today because Spring Boot has support from I think 2 or 3 years ago. For example, in HAL, we can return a list of links in any of our resources that just contain the links from that resource to other resources that is important to have. In this case, it contains the affordances, the controls to go to the different pages of a collection. The important thing is that these names are standard link types. They come from IANA link relations. So any consumer that is programmed to understand the 80 types or 90 or whatever they are types of, or just these few, knows how to operate with a pagination. So if you have ever coded a client and you have ever coded a pagination system on a client, you know what a big relief this is, because you don't need to construct your page anymore. You construct your URL anymore to the page you want. You just I know that if I have a next, I can show the user a next button to go to the next page. If I have a previous, I can go to the previous one. If I want to go to the last one, I can choose last. The other important thing we gain with hypermedia formats, it's actions. Actions is just the last part of this resource, the operation array. This is also from a real API that we have created with APIO, and it's showing us that this is a people resource that provides us a collection of users. There are 10 items, and it's telling us the operations we have available in that resource. So it's telling us that we can create people using that endpoint. And there is something much more important in this representation, is that this operation is limited to the permission system of the authenticated user. So if a user doesn't have permission to create a blog posting or to create a person, this operation is not going to appear. So you can create amazingly clever UIs, headless UIs, by just, do I have a create operation here? If I do have an operation, I can show the plus button to create a new person. If I don't have it, I don't need to do anything else. But you don't need to program logic to calculate if a user can do something or not. It's just provided for you in the response. And the other important thing is the profile. The profile, we talk about something similar in the unconference, talking about GraphQL versus REST. The profile just contains all the information of your API in a machine-readable version. So a consumer can understand, if a consumer understands this profile, for example, it can understand the description or the entry point of this API, and it also contains all the supported classes by this API. So it's just auto documentation. all the information you provide to APIO is going to generate, is going to update this profile and give you more and more information give your consumers more and more information so they can be clever. And of course, we have linked to other resources. In this case, this is a blog posting, and this is a link to the creator of that blog posting. So you can just navigate to the creator instead of returning the ID and constructing the URL. And the last thing, as I told you, the second pillar we have here, the shared vocabularies, is using standard types. What are standard types? For example, schema.org. Schema.org is a collection of types used for the linked web. Schema.org is like a foundation created by several big internet companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, to put together a common language to use on the internet, so every consumer can understand a web page, every search system can understand a web page without having to do so much work. They all speak the same language. So, for example, we have this result from Google, and in this result, you can see that it contains a rating, like a rating stars, and also contains the value of that rating. That's just this. It's when you create the HTML of that specific part of your page, you add several information to the searcher to tell what are you returning in that website. For example, you are returning the publisher. You are saying any machine who reads this page, who published this rating, its name and its URL. You also are giving the provider who provides this product, the product you are rating, in this case, Liferay, and you are saying that it's an organization from Schema.org. You say what product we are reviewing. Would you say that it's an item reviewed, and it's of time product, and its name is Liferay DXP. And you also add the review rating and the worst rating possible, the best rating possible, and the actual rating value. With all this, any consumer who understands Schema.org can understand your web page. So what we have done is just taking all this information into APIs. So how do we port this to APIs? So this is an example of our good old JSON WS, but in fact, it's our good old couple JSON WS, because here we have a blocks entry ID and a user ID. So by returning this information in our resources, we are forcing our users, our consumers, to know how to get a user, a blog entry, and have to construct the URL accordingly to the API we have at the moment. This, in fact, two couple, because we are using all the names, all the name fields of our internal model, of our blocks entry. So if we change everything in our internal model, this is going to change, and these are not standard names. These are just names that Liferay invented. So what can we do to solve this? By using shared vocabularies. This is the same example as you see before, but turning every name into the corresponding Schema.org name, saying that this blocks entry is in fact a Schema.org blog posting, and for example, changing the content to article body, changing the subtitle to alternative headline, that all of those are names exposed as a standard in a Schema.org, well thought by clever people, at least than me, that have, you can see, since the whole Schema.org is published on GitHub, and you can see all the discussions they have to every one of the names to be sure that they are understood by every language, every culture. So it's really, really well thought. So, for example, we're saying that this is of type blog posting. We are also mapping some elements, And we are saying that this has a link to a creator. This is the link, and this is going to return you a person type. A person is also published in schema.org and can be retrieved from there to know what can we expect from it. So if you want to take something out of this workshop, is that defining the types and their mapping mapping the internal models and the actions is the most important thing when writing an API. So if you spend hours, days thinking about your schema, thinking about what are you going to return, thinking about what name should I use, it's something that for us as developers, we usually don't think about it much often. Like, what do you put about here in this name? Just use subtitle, and that's how you couple a system. That's how you confuse your consumers, because they don't understand in every culture, in every language, what you are returning. So, right, let's get into coding. How's APIO Architect enabling this? By just four actions. On the one hand, the representor pattern, the vocabularies. So how do we express with APIO Architect all this shared vocabulary information with what we call the representor pattern? The representor pattern is something that Mike Admundsen, one of these API gurus, created, and it's just that it's telling you that you should use a generic form of storing your types when you return. Instead of returning an organization, just return something that is generic to your system, so your system knows how to transform that generic information into any multiple formats. So related with that, what would you say, which format is better for an API? It could be HAL, that is pretty easy to read and contains a links field with all the links of our resource. It could be Siren, that has that has the properties in a properties field and the actions, and contains the actions that the user can perform on these results. Or it could be JSON-LD, that elevates all the information from schema.org. Well, the truth is that all of them are the best format, or maybe none. It just depends on your case. Maybe for your case, you don't need all the hypermedia stuff. For some API you are writing, you can stay on the lowest, on the swarm of POCs. But maybe for other API you need to write, you want to use all the information that comes with HTTP verbs or resources, or you want Hypermedia Controls because you are writing a really an API that needs to evolve really fast. So it depends on the case of the API you are writing. So what's the solution then? The representor pattern. And the representor is just annotating your DTO like we did before with the XML root elements. These are the first APIO code you are going to see. And it's just transforming your old DTO, your old JAX-REST DTO, into something that APIO can understand semantically. So, for example, you have a type, an add type annotation, instead of saying XML root element, that is an annotation that is, we could say, it's not really understandable, that you are outputting JSON out of it. We have created a type annotation that just receives the type from schema.org that you want to map. And if you don't have a schema.org type that matches your internal type, there's also options in the annotations to provide information about that type, so APIO can create it and append it to the profile. So from now on, that type exists as a contract in your API. We also provide information about the ID of our resource, so APIO knows how to obtain an ID out of an instance of your resource. And then we provide several field information with the add field, providing the name that we which want to expose in the final resource. APIO is going to process all this this class is going to process all the annotations, all the returning types, and with that is going to construct the profile, and it's going to understand better what do you want to return in your API. So the first thing we are going to do, we are going to do something similar as Victor did, just with one resource, because we don't have many time. We are going to transform one of our POJOs into an APIO interface. The APIO annotations is something really new, so we just we haven't merged it yet. This is like a beta. And right now we only support interfaces. We don't support classes yet, but it's going to be done in the following weeks. So the first thing we need to do is split the POJO into an interface and an implementation class. That in fact is something that the OSGI Alliance encourages you to do when you are creating an API. So the first thing we're going to do, the first thing we have to do is remove the recipes application, because we are not going to hook to this application. APIO creates its own application, so we don't need this application anymore, so we can just delete it. And then, for example, we can go to our user, and we are going to split this user in two. On the one hand, the APIO user, the interface that APIO is going to read to create our user, and in the other hand, the implementation that could be the one we have here. So, for example, in IntelliJ IDEA, we can press F5, and it's going to copy this class into two. Or we could also, I think they have something like called struct, maybe. No, push. No, in this case we don't have an interface, so we can do that. Let's just copy the interface and duplicate it with and we are going to call it with the same resource that schema.org provides. So let's go to schema.org, and I'm going to tell what the type is. We have the person type that matches perfectly our user, our library user. So we are going to use person as the type for our users. So just call this interface person. And now things we need to remove. We need to remove the XML root element and change it to type that is inside vocabulary. The vocabulary annotation, it's a meta annotation, that just contains all the annotations inside of it. The vocabulary as it is, it doesn't do anything, just contains all the annotations so we can scope them. And we have the type. And as I say, for the type, we have to provide a value. We have to provide the name of this type. So in this case, is person. But if, for example, person as a string. But for example, if, as I said before, if there is no type in a schema.org that matches your internal type, you could ask, because there are other schemas around there. Schema.org is not the only one, or you can even create your one. You can add here a schema URL to provide information about where this type is defined on the internet. Or you can just add a description, and APIO is going to add it to the profile as a custom type of your API. So in this case, we're just going to use person, so we don't need the value. And now, since this is going to be an interface, we don't need any of the private fields, any of the constructors. We just want the getters, and we don't need any of the XML element annotations. We can just remove them, and also remove, and also we are going to remove all the returns since this is an interface. Okay, so this is going to be our whiteboard for creating a type. It's just an interface, a simple POJO that contains some getters, and we are going to tell APIO via annotations what those getters means, what are these fields. So the first one of all is the ID. We need to annotate this with @ID, and by doing that, we are telling APIO that this field contains the ID of our resource. Pretty straightforward. And there's also a tricky part that is going to be inside the documentation, that you need to also extend this interface from identifier, providing the type of we are going to see in a minute why this is important. Just by doing this, you are telling APIO that this person is identified with a long, and the ID is telling which of the fields that return a long is in fact the one that returns the ID. And for the other fields, we can just use the field annotation. So I'm a bit lazy, so I'm going to create all at once. We can add the field, and here we need to provide the name we want for the field. So for example, for the portrait URL, if you go to schema.org, you are going to see there is no portrait. There is no something. There is not any that relates to the portrait of a user, but we have an image. That is, the image is present in schema.org follows like a hierarchy for the types. At the top there are things. Everything in schema.org is a thing, and then they, like in Java, like with the objects in Java, they keep creating more and more types. For example, at the top, we can see that a person is just a thing. But for example, there are other types like blog posting that are more nested. There is creative work. Then inside the creative work, we have articles. Inside articles, social media posting, and a specific type of social media posting is a blog posting. So a blog posting can have a specific information for a blog posting. That in this case, it doesn't have none. It has none. But also it can have all the fields that a social media posting could have. An article, just like in a Java hierarchy of classes and objects. So in person, as I said, we have an image that is, everything has a name, additional type, an alternate name, an identifier, and also an image. So in this case, for the user's avatar, we can use the field image. So image. Then we have screen name. So here, for example, when we were creating the API for users at Liferay, we think, what is a screen name in Liferay? And when we were navigating through schema.org and to the types that a person has, we found that the screen name is just the alternate name that the schema.org has. It's just an alternate name for a user that we can use to perform some operations. So we can use alternate name. Then, for example, for the email, we have email. It's pretty straightforward. And then we can go to the first name and last name. Here, I encourage you to go to the GitHub repo and read the discussion about why they don't have a first name and last name in the person, because it's really, really interesting why they choose what they've chosen. That is this. Instead of first name, they use given name, and instead of last name, they use family name. And they choose this because if you take all the humans in the planet, there is a bigger portion of human that use this system, and it seems this system can also be applied to for example, us Europeans, or in case Spaniards, that we have a first name and two last names. In the opposite, doesn't apply, for example, to the US or Chinese or other cultures out there. So they chose given name and family name. given name is for the name, the name they give you, and family name is what we have here as last name or surname. So for example, here in first name, we could use given name, and as last name, we could use family name. Then the job title, that is as email, is straightforward, is job title. And for the full name, so the concatenation of your different names, we have in schema.org the name. That is just the name of the item. So what's the name of a person? The concatenation of all their names and titles and doctor, share, whatever it has. It's that the complete concatenation of all those fields is the name. So here we can just place name. And just with these simple annotations, we have tell APIO how to construct a person, how to construct a user in a more semantic and a more standard way. So the only thing we have left is to convert our user DTO, the one we are instantiating, into a person. So it's just by implementing person. We don't need anymore the XML root element, and we don't need anymore the XML elements. In fact, these are now overridden from the interface. And we also doesn't need the empty constructor. So our resources are now returning APIO types. This is a feature we are going to support in a really short period of time, that to use APIO annotations in JAX-RS code. So right now, in a really small amount of time, you could use a JAX-RS resource like this one, and here here, like the user one, and here to support all the feature that comes with APIO. We just need to change this return type to person. And the APIO machinery is going to transform that user DTO into a person, and it's going to provide links and all the information, and it's going to add it to the profile and all the things that APIO can do for you. But right now, we need to keep doing finishing the action in order to convert our user. But that is something that's going to be able in a short amount of time. So with the representer pattern, with these annotation types, the internal models are going to be transformed to types and stored as a generic representation. APIO is, you could see the representer as a really huge map of a string to something, where string is the name of the field you want to expose, and the something contains information like the type of that thing. Is if what you are returning in this field is a string, is a link to another item, is a Boolean, is the ID of the resource. APIO just has all the information stored in a generic way, so that they can be mapped to the representation format chosen by the consumer, chosen by the user. So one of the things we have followed in APIO from the very beginning is to be able to easily represent your resources in the format you want. For right now, we have support for HAL, JSON, plain JSON, and JSON LD, but any user could create a new mapper for another representation that just formats from the internal generic way of the resource to the format you add, and to the format you want to support. For example, XML or BSON or something like that. So what we gain with the representer, with this type? First, we enforce the mapping. We enforce at least to make our API developers think about what do you want to return, what do you want to have as a type, what the name of your fields, the name of your types. If it should be, should I expose this as a field, or is something that is internal to my application? Also, we gain the power to abstract from URLs. since APIO is going to create links to other resources for us, we don't need anymore to think about URLs. This is something that helps both the backend developers, but both API developers and consumer developers. We also gain a generic representation to be able to represent in any format we want. And we also want link relations. We can link to other resources easily. We are going to see it in a minute. So go back to how is APIO enabling these evolvable APIs. The first of all is the representor pattern that we have seen with the type annotation, with all the vocabulary annotations. And the next thing are the actions. And actions look like a JAX-RS resource, but similar with the vocabulary retention in a more semantic way. So instead of creating endpoints, random endpoints that react to a HTTP verb and has a name and has a path, in APIO you just need to create an action router for a specific class annotated with type. In this case, it's for blog posting, but it could be for the person we just created. And then inside that class, we just need to provide information about the endpoints. If you see, this has just the same signature of the old endpoints we created with JAX-RS. For example, the retrieve returns a blog posting and returns the ID, but instead of being annotated with path, ID, and the ID being annotated with a path param and extract the ID from here, you just return the blog posting, say APIO that this is an ID, annotated but at ID, like in the vocabulary, like in the type, and just tell APIO what that endpoint does. In this case, you can tell us semantically by using one of our provided annotations, like retrieve, replace, remove. We have annotations for the basic CRUD operations like create, retrieve, delete, or update. But we also have the generic action annotation that can be used to create any action that you want to provide to your resources. And the most important thing is that a user is going to receive in the representation the list of actions, the list of these actions available for their resource that they can execute, only those that they can execute. So if you, for example, for a blog posting, declare how do a user subscribes to the blog posting to get the feed from it, to get the comments, to get the new information, you can just provide a new endpoint annotated with action, providing the name of the action you are creating, and APIO is going to add that information only if the user can subscribe to the blog posting. So we are just going to do a quick go to our person resource to expose the person we just created as a APIO resource. So we can go to our user resource, and one of the best things about APIO is that transforming JAX-RS to APIO is more or less removing code. That is something like as developers always love. I don't know why, but the thing we love the most is deleting the thing we do. So that's really funny. But in that case, we just need to remove the component, remove all the information inside the component, and make this class implement action router for the type we are exposing. In this case, person. This action router is an empty interface, doesn't have anything. It's just for convenience, or also OSGI can track all the action routers and process them. We can use either this way or the property way, like the whiteboard does with the properties inside the component annotation. But this is so much faster because OSGI just needs to know which class they have to look for. They don't have to iterate over all your components looking for a specific property. So that's the first thing, annotating as just a component and implementing the action router. And then we can remove all the JAX-RS annotations and tell APIO what does this endpoint does. In this case, is the endpoint used to retrieve persons. So just use retrieve. As I said, this is the actions, as if we have vocabulary as a container for all the vocabulary actions, so for all the vocabulary annotations. We have actions as a container for all the action annotations. And the action annotations, the only important one is the action. That is something over here. That's the only important one. That has forget about the reusable, that is going to be removed. It's just the name and the HTTP method. You provide a name for it, a semantic name or a name you want, and the method that you should use for that action. And what APIO provides is aliases, annotation, action aliases for the common actions like create, delete, replace, and so on. So we just by annotating our retrieve method with retrieve, we are telling APIO that this is what he should call to retrieve person. And the only thing we have left is removing the path param and telling APIO that in this specific parameter, it should inject the ID of the resource, the ID provided from the request. APIO is going to create all the URLs for us, is going to create everything for us, is going to maintain our whole API ecosystem, and it's going to inject the ID of our resource when this method is called automatically, without us have to do anything. So just by doing this, we are opening an endpoint for retrieving persons, but we need a way to navigate to this person. So you can have two ways, either by creating a collection resource, a collection endpoint that returns a collection of users that is attached to the entry point, that only URL, or you can just link this resource from another. So, and for that, I'm going to be pretty quick, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to remove everything and just go to the final state of our workshop. So here we have the person type, we have the recipe, and we have the restaurant type. This is all the DTOs we have split it into interface and DTO. And we also have the restaurant action router that exposes both the collection of restaurants and a specific restaurant. And the last annotation we have in APIO is the at entry point. With that annotation, you are telling APIO to add this endpoint to the root of your application or your API. So if right now we deploy this, the, yeah, yeah, APIO creates our own application, APIO application that is it's going to be in the documentation. So instead of adding the config file for your application, you just tweak the properties for the APIO application. So you can do whatever you want with that application. You can expose, like here, by default is allowing guests to access our APIs. It supports both basic auth and OAuth, but you can choose whatever you want for that application. Okay, it's deployed. Let's see. It looks like it started. So now we can call API. Yeah. Okay. We are going to use basic auth. Like 1 second. I'm going to copy a valid user. Okay, can you see it on the back? Yep. This is the entry point of our app, and since we have the add entry point annotation to our retrieve page for restaurants collection, we are seeing now this resource inside the collection that says that is of type collection. So when we call this ID, this URL is going to return a collection that manages restaurants. So let's see if that's correct or not. Okay, we see here a collection that has a total number of items of 1 because we chose a chef for making this request, and every chef is only attached to one restaurant. Inside view, that is another type of IANA, and this type says that this is like a view of a bigger collection. So if we have a collection that like is all this page, the view field is like only a small portion of this collection. That's what they chose the view name. It's something they do. And in this inside this view, we have the links to the nest or to the pagination affordances. First, last. In this case, we only have first, last because we are in the first one, so there's no previous one, and there's only one page, so there's no next one. We also have the ID of the collection, and then we have the members. And inside members, we have the first restaurant with, for example, if we go here to the restaurant type annotated with APIO, I forgot to tell you our most important annotation, that is the add linked model. With that annotation, you are telling APIO that in this field, I'm returning the ID of another resource, and instead of putting the ID in the final representation, I want the link to that specific resource. So we are just saying, I'm going to return a link of a person. Here, you just have to return a user ID, and APIO is going to construct the URL for you, so our consumers can navigate to that URL without constructing it. So we have the name, we have the logo URL, we have the type, that is a restaurant, the ID, the chef ID, and we have then the link to the recipes that is here. And that's the other annotation, brother to link model, that is related collection. With the related collection annotation, you are telling that APIO that you want to create a collection that is nested to the resource we are right now. So for example, if we have a blog posting that has comments, that comments collection is nested to our blog posting, to our blog posting result, because it depends on the blog posting to be created. So in this case, we are creating a collection of recipes that depends on a restaurant, specifically on the restaurant ID, so on the organization ID. So in our recipe action router, we would have a retrieve recipes. What are you doing? Method annotated with retrieve. And in that method, instead of don't requesting an ID, for example, for the restaurants endpoint, in this case, since we depend on a parent, we depend on having a restaurant, we just say that this ID is a parent ID of type restaurant. So we are telling here, inject the restaurant ID when a user calls this URL. And APIO is going to create an URL like this one. API, like every API, like every action. Then the name of your parent resource, restaurant, the ID of that resource, the organization, and then the resource you want to get, recipes. This is just like any common REST URL. So if we go to that URL, we are going to see the list of recipes created for that restaurant. We can see, for example, the view, but we have many more objects. We have all the recipes here with their information, region, ingredients, everything else, and APIO knows how to operate all these fields. And as I told you, we have the profile. The profile is a machine readable resource that explains all your API, all your types, all the supported actions to a machine, to a consumer. So he can know beforehand what to expect. In this case, it has a restaurant that is saying that supports this operation, just retrieve. But if, for example, we add a create operation, we would see here also the create operation. And then it has supported properties. It supported property address, name, logo URL, that if you have said that all these come from schema.org, I think something at the end, here in the context, this is just a JSON-LD thing. You are saying that the vocabulary for all these resource is schema.org. So all the types, all the names that he's going to find, like not a URL, just the type, name, job title, email, are part of schema.org. So you can go to schema.org / that name and find the documentation for that specific type, that specific field. That is being written right now by another colleague in Spain, because this annotation system is pretty new. We had before we had a functional DSL to create this, because APIO was just an internal project, and we saw that DSL wasn't functioning very well. We saw an opportunity for creating this, so we expose it as an open source project, so anyone can use it, and we are migrating all the machinery of all these DSL to annotation. So right now we have support for adding the roots, for adding the actions, and adding the vocabularies, and we are starting supporting the permission. So it would be like a method like this one, but annotated with something like this method checks permission for create, and instead of returning a list of recipe type, just return a Boolean. You can receive the ID, you can receive the credentials of the user, the permission checker, check whatever you want, and return the Boolean in the return true if it has. An APIO is going to call that method automatically for you to see if the action should be show or not. And as I told you, we support several representation formats. Right now, by default, is returns JSON-LD because it's the most powerful of all. But you could also request application JSON. For the profile, because the profile is only for hypermedia formats. This is just a plain JSON, pretty easy to read for everyone. We have the URL. We can go to that URL, and here we are going to see. Without any of the information that comes with JSON-LD. We don't have information about the type, we don't have information about the schema, or just plain JSON. And we also have how. Come on. So we have HAL with the links to the own entry point and the restaurant. You can go to the restaurant and see what we previously have in a HAL format. And this is not limited to any of those three formats. Creating a new type is something that's going to be in the documentation once we release it, and creating and adding a new format to be supported is going to be really easy. Just a few calls to some methods to construct your object. So, for example, supporting XML or supporting VSON is going to be really easy to do. That's more or less much of it. Okay, so to end this workshop, we are just going to give you a few hints about what's coming to APIO, apart from the permission system that we didn't count as the future because it's the present right now. First of all, with annotations comes a great flexibility to do things. So we are going to add support for Java Bean validations. How many of you know what Java Bean validations are? Okay. Java Bean validations are a set like a complete framework or a complete validation framework created by Java by the JDK. It's in the JDK. It's a standard for validating POJOs, for validating beans, and it's a annotated oriented framework. In here, you can see the email not null or not empty. That's telling, in that case, that's telling the machinery that we have behind that the things that you should validate when requesting this body, because that's something important that I didn't say. That if, for example, we create a method for creating users, like public person type create, we just have to annotate it with create to say that this endpoint creates users. And here we can just request an instance of our user, of the information of the user we want to create by using the same interface that we use to return. So we can just request a person type and annotate it with body. With just this annotation, we are telling APIO that this object, this Java object, is constructed from the information on the body request of the post, of the put, of any verb we use. And APIO is going to use the information inside the person type, inside these annotations, to validate if everything is correctly. So, for example, in this case, for person is just going to validate that everything is a string and it is present. But for something more complicated, like a recipe here, it could even validate that the user that you are providing exists. It could call the database for you, check if that user exists, and if not, return a bad request to the consumer if you want, of course. So one thing we want to enhance is to be able to annotate our POJOs, our types with the Java Bean validations annotations. So you can use all the standard validations, but the great thing about Java Bean validations is that you can create your own. You can create your own annotations that allows you to validate your fields or even the whole POJO. It's just not constrained to fields. You can annotate the POJO and say, once you have all the fields validated, validate the whole class by checking that the two passwords are the same in a user, or that the name contains plus more than, you know what I mean. The second thing we have in our roadmap is Open API. I don't know how many of you know what Open API is. And Swagger. Have any of you know Swagger? Swagger is just the tool that previously that evolves into Open API. Open API is just a standard for defining APIs that is getting more and more use. Right now, it's used by lots of important companies out there to declare the APIs, your schema, your URLs in a standard way that any consumer can understand. It's something similar to the profile we have, but this is it was more created for the old REST APIs where URLs are much important and you know how to construct the URLs. So we didn't want to leave that part of the world behind, because there are people that wants to use our APIs in that such way. So we are going to automatically create an Open API profile out of the information you have given, with all the URLs present in your system, how to construct the URLs, how to get the different resources, and of course, all the schema with all the types you have. And last, we are going to have documentation. We are going to provide a whole GitHub page with all the documentation. It's going to be on both the developer network and in our own repo, since APIO Architect, I didn't say this, but APIO Architect can be used outside Liferay Portal. You can create a small OSGI container with JAX-RS and APIO, and it's going to work without even needing to to launch a Liferay Portal. It's just a small piece of code, Liferay Portal agnostic. And I think that's it. If you want to check what are we doing, you can always go to our repo con Liferay APIO Architect, and we have this APIO sample hosted on WeDeploy that keeps updated with every release of our master. So in this APIO sample, you can see the features we have from a consumer point of view. And that's it. Thank you.